Now, international relations can't be ignored despite the shutting of borders amid the COVID-19 pandemic, especially when it involves our neighbors. President Cyril Ramaphosa's two special envoys, Baleka Mbete and Sidiropoulos, went to Zimbabwe amid claims of human rights abuses there. They returned home from their one-day visit empty-handed. They met President Emmerson Mnangagwa but didn't meet the opposition. What's next for Zimbabwe and what are its implications for South Africa? Elizabeth Sidiropoulos of the South African Institute for International Affairs joins me now to unpack this further. Elizabeth, good evening. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show tonight. The relationship of Zimbabwe and South Africa and this issue of envoys being sent to try and resolve whatever internal things may be taking place in that country isn't new. The processes, however, don't ever seem to lead into a different trajectory or have a different outcome. What are the real challenges in terms of how this problem is being approached?
Well, you know, we've been involved as South Africa with Zimbabwe for now 20 years, on and off. I think there was the term quiet diplomacy, which characterized President Mbeki's engagement with Zimbabwe, I think has stuck. And that approach said that, we're not going to call them out publicly. We're not going to call ZANU-PF publicly on sort of non-compliance with agreements we've made or of violence, harassment around elections, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to try to work with them behind the scenes. And in effect, what had transpired over that period is that a situation where South Africa by 2008 was the SADC mediator, South Africa wasn't actually seen as a fully honest broker. It was seen as being very much supportive of ZANU-PF, and that made it really difficult to actually be able to carry forward with the process. It is true, however, that there were some serious reforms that South Africa was able to achieve in the process of mediation from 2008 before the elections, which actually allowed MDC at the time, for those of us who remember, to actually win the preponderance of votes and seats in Parliament. Since then, I think, though, we haven't been able and haven't been willing, again, to use megaphone diplomacy to actually keep the Zimbabweans from 2008 to 2013 to the implementation of the global political agreement that came out after the election. And I think post-2013, I think disengaged. We see, though, that this is a crisis that is not going to go away. And unless we do something differently, your earlier remark, Kathy, I think we're not going to get a different outcome.
So what does that do for this current moment? Because one of the things that I was watching last week was that ZANU-PF statement that had been issued following the comments made by the ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, talking about human rights abuses in the country, and ZANU coming out and saying, well, you've got your own problems in South Africa and keep your opinions effectively to yourself. What does it mean that ZANU-PF is publicly saying that, well, they're not bothered by South Africa's willingness or even need to want to be part of the resolution to problems in that country?
Well, this is exactly the thing, and this has been characteristic of the way in which ZANU has engaged with South Africa, with the ANC government, whether it is with President Mbeki or indeed with President Zuma and President Zuma's envoys. Have we forgotten President Mugabe calling out Lindiwe Zulu and calling her the streetwalker? And South Africa hasn't ever sort of risen to the occasion, risen to the bait, to actually say this is a line in the sand and we're not actually going to entertain that kind of engagement with you. The fact of the matter is, and this is critical for South Africa now, it's very clear what's going on in Zimbabwe. I think the South African government also has a good sense of what's going on, both from its security sector, but also, I would argue, from the trip that the envoys took over the weekend. I think it was very clear that there are also, from their engagements, even though they only saw the president and the foreign minister, that not all is well in the state of Denmark. And I think, in fairness to the South Africans, there was a whole series of meetings lined up with the opposition, with the broad opposition, not just the political parties. So now the fact that they were not allowed to engage with that means that I think the ball is now back in our court to actually say and to look at a number of points that we can possibly, pressure points that we can exercise. And it's not a simple thing of sort of people are saying send in the army, but there are diplomatic avenues. We can use the SADC summit this week. The fact that the OPDS is now going to be chaired by Botswana going forward, no longer by Zimbabwe at the end of this week. There are a number of pressure points that I think we need to now be bold about to test and to implement, and very importantly, not to be scared to actually make some really bold statements about what we believe is going on in Zimbabwe and that this is not acceptable.
Elizabeth, I'm keen to explore what some of those pressure points might be, because you look at a situation like the border crossing at the Bedbridge border, where that fence has been, of course, compromised. People are walking in and out of South Africa on a daily basis. That would be an easy place to start, where you have the military and South African law officers simply not allowing anybody across the border. But that's not the case, because there seems to be empathy towards what the people of Zimbabwe are going through. So there's a legal aspect of that, but there's also the humanitarian side of it. What approach is the best in order to send a message to the Zimbabwean government, but also ensure that the ordinary people of Zimbabwe are not necessarily being left to fight for themselves effectively?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that point that you make is absolutely correct. Where it has to hurt is with the ZANU-PF elite and with the military. And so the interventions are not about closing the border. It's not about sort of stopping power being sent across or things like that. I think it's really at the diplomatic level. And so there are a number of issues. There is, as I said, the SADC summit, which is happening this week, culminating on Friday and Saturday, I think. There, South Africa can actually make a strong point about putting this onto the agenda. The Zimbabwean chair of the OPDS is outgoing. There is an incoming chair, which is Botswana. I think South Africa should have a conversation with Botswana about how they can collaborate, cooperate in taking this forward, whether it is by issuing a very strong statement and then following up with a SADC-mandated delegation. I think the South African government should also not be turned off by the fact that our two envoys were not allowed to have a conversation with the civil society actors that had been lined up on over the weekend, and to actually explore possibilities and options of speaking to them, whether it is through the medium of Skype or Zoom or whatever, or through the trips that they undertake, the opposition does undertake to South Africa from time to time. That might be difficult now because, of course, the borders are closed, but there are those kinds of options. And then there is the option of actually sending a strong message in terms of diplomatic personnel, telling Zimbabwe, you know, you need we're going to expel a couple of your diplomats to show how serious this is and that this cannot be sanctioned. So, you know, there's a whole diplomatic armory. We need to be willing to decide what works best in the current context. I don't think sort of sending them out, sending the Zimbabwean diplomats away at this point is necessarily the best way. But what I'm trying to indicate is that there is a smorgasbord of things that we can test and work together with the region, particularly with Botswana, over the next few weeks.